In August, the United Auto Workers Union overwhelmingly voted to stop production if demands on pay and benefits were not met. Facing the calls are the big three automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis. Negotiators are discussing four-year contracts for around 150,000 hourly workers, and specifically, the UAW is demanding a 46% pay raise and a 32-hour week with 40 hours of pay. The union's current contract expires at just before midnight on September 14th, so we're coming up to it. President Biden, often labeled the most pro-union president ever, yesterday downplayed the threat of a strike, saying he thinks any kind of action is unlikely to happen. Joining us now is Greg Migliore, Autoblog's Editor-in-Chief. And Greg, I know you've been watching this very closely as well. Put this in perspective for us, the likelihood of a strike, how this compares to past actions, because we've got new leadership at the UAW. Give us sort of the what we need to know going into this deadline.
Yeah, hey, good morning, everybody. I would agree with the president that I think the likelihood of a strike is still relatively low. That being said, this is the most aggressive, I would say, bargaining tactics we've seen from the UAW in quite some time. They last struck in 2019 against General Motors, and that was, I believe, it was a 40-day strike that cost the company billions of dollars. So it's certainly not in the best interest of the Detroit Three to have to weather another strike. Again, the broader economic impact, even for a relatively short strike, would get into the billions. So they certainly want to, it's in everyone's best interest, if you will, to try to come to an agreement before that September 14th deadline.
Greg, it sounds like the auto manufacturers, at least GM and Ford, are confident that they'll be able to avert a strike. GM saying in their most recent earnings call that we have a long history of negotiating fair contracts with both unions that reward employees, support long-term success of the business. Goal this time, no different. But if they do not see a similar kind of success as they have seen in the past this time, what type of hit could we be talking about in terms of the prioritization of certain production standards and goals that they had set forth?
Well, the way the General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, which was Chrysler, the way their manufacturing footprints are set up, everything is very interrelated. So the UAW could choose a couple of different paths. They could do like a full national strike, or they could do a targeted strike, which could be just as effective. If you shut down one or two very specific plants that make a specific part, that's essentially as good as shutting down the whole company. So we could see a couple of different paths here. I think it's also worth noting that the UAW is under new leadership. Shawn Fain, he's been in office a relatively short time, and he's taken definitely a more outspoken, some might say argumentative approach. But I think UAW leadership also sees opportunity. You have a president in the Oval Office who is the most pro-union, as he says, in generations. You have a highly publicized writers' strike going on in Hollywood. I think the mood for labor in this country is definitely swinging to a climate where there would be some support for workers. So I think the UAW president senses some opportunity here, and I think what he's doing is leveraging it. I wouldn't necessarily call it saber rattling. But I think he's definitely making a lot of demands, which is good negotiation, in an attempt to get probably enough part of what he's asking for. Do I think they're going to get a 46% wage increase? I think that's probably unlikely, but I think they could definitely get some significant concessions from the Detroit Three, which would certainly be a victory for the union.